Hey listeners, we want to let you know we're very excited about our new free webinar, How Today's Successful Leaders Avoid Burnout and Create Work-Life Balance Without Changing Jobs. We've been hearing from leaders everywhere that as leaders, you're working harder than ever, those long days, weekends, and multiple projects, but you're not having the success you desire. You don't have a life and are starting to regret the amount of time and energy you're spending at work. You come home physically, emotionally, and mentally exhausted at the end of the day and feel guilty because you don't have the capacity to respond to the needs of your family. If you're like these leaders, you're wondering whether you have the stamina to keep pushing through day after day because increasing expectations, resource challenges, and competing priorities are depleting your energy and leaving you questioning your future. We hear you and we see you. That's why we're inviting you to register for the free How Today's Successful Leaders Avoid Burnout and Create a Work-Life Balance Without Changing Jobs webinar. In the webinar, we will share the secret ingredient and proven process for creating work-life balance and avoiding burnout. Go over to missinglogic.com/new-events to learn more and register.
This is Healthcare's Missing Logic podcast, episode number 226. Today's Encore episode is the importance of creating margin for leaders. And this is such a great episode, and it is so needed today.
And why is that?
We need margin.
We're burned out. So burnout continues to be on the rise, right? There's no me time. There's no rejuvenation time. There's no rest, there's no vacations. It's just go, go, go. And I think a recent, study showed that senior leaders, 70% of senior leaders say they're burned out. So, we talk about healthcare leaders in this particular podcast and talk from that perspective, but this is applicable to all leaders. All leaders are experiencing some really serious levels of burnout. It's not unique to healthcare. And, we've all had the COVID experience. We may not have had COVID, but we've been dealing with the aftermath of COVID and all of the changes and all of the challenges that have been a result of that. So I think this is a very, very pertinent episode to revisit.
Yeah, and there's some new tensions today that are a result of the pandemic as well. In addition to the persistent burnout that Tracy spoke about, there's also other tensions that are new that are creating impact on the margin of our life, such as, living in this virtual hybrid world, and there's not a balance there yet, and it's causing a lot of stress and a lot of imbalance in people's lives, and we need to create more margin at work and at home now.
Yeah, and we won't have well-being if we don't have margin. And there's a big emphasis in organizations as well, right, to support the well-being of the employees and of the leaders. And that won't happen unless we have some margin. And the increasing demands on our time and our attention make it appear to be pretty challenging to do that, right? So everything seems to be like all the challenges, all of the demands, everything seems like it's on steroids right now, right? There's just an increase and increase and increase. Doesn't seem to be going away at all.
And one of the other reasons we wanted to share this episode again is we have some great call to actions at the end of this episode of what you can actually do to create more margin in all different aspects of your life. So heads up, if you're listening for the first time or you're listening again, grab a notepad and write down these tips. And we also want to stress that it doesn't have to be big. You can start small and start where you're at. Just create a wedge for that margin we all need in our lives. So learn the tips and stay tuned. Welcome back to Healthcare's Missing Logic podcast. This is the only podcast that shows you how to leverage polarity intelligence, an essential competency for healthcare leaders, and the missing logic in healthcare, so you can create healthy, healing organizations and become a thriving, resilient, and unstoppable healthcare leader.
We are your hosts, Tracy Christofferson and Michelle Trosett. We've been best friends and colleagues for over 30 years. And during that time, we coached healthcare leaders across North America around how to create healthy, healing organizations.
Today, we coach healthcare leaders and leadership teams to live thriving, resilient, and balanced lives, combat burnout, and create the best places to give and receive care.
This podcast is for the unsung hero of healthcare, the healthcare leader. We want you to know we see you and we'll be here for you each week. In this podcast, we're going to challenge healthcare's industry norms, flip limiting beliefs, and share proven strategies so you can be your best self at work and at home, live and lead intentionally, and experience well-being and joy.
We are glad you are here and look forward to sharing the journey with you. If you aren't totally convinced this podcast is for you, just listen to a few episodes and convince yourself.
Wow, welcome to Healthcare's Missing Logic podcast. This is Tracy.
And Michelle.
Imagine that. You got us both again for another incredible episode, right?
That's right.
Yeah. This has been a week.
It has been.
Right? We're batching again. Lots of episodes, lots of energy, lots of fun.
Doing what we love and loving what we do.
That's right. That's right. That's what it's all about, right?
It is. It's so wonderful to record these podcasts and come to you in whatever medium or form works best for you, whether it's our YouTube channel or your favorite podcast player.
Yeah. We're just happy to be here and share what we know.
Yes.
And what we don't know.
We're always honest.
Yes.
We're always
that's right.
honest.
That's right.
Well, today we're going to talk about something that we've been learning quite a bit about for many, many years. And that is creating margin in our lives as healthcare leaders. Let me say that again.
And entrepreneurs.
And entrepreneurs.
Yeah, because you think being a healthcare leader is tough. Try entrepreneurialism.
That's a whole new frontier.
Oh, yes.
And you need a lot of margin.
Yes.
If you're going to do that. Yeah. So, well, unquestionably, as healthcare leaders, you have seen an increase in work intensity, in your workload, for all the reasons we talk about every single week. And there's also been an increase in the complaints of fatigue and exhaustion amongst healthcare leaders as a result of that. So that puts you at high risk for burnout. And it's really important we learn how to course correct by creating margin before we burn out. So it's a very timely topic right now as we work with conflicted healthcare leaders throughout the country. And so this topic is going to be about creating margin in your life so that you can become that thriving, resilient, unstoppable, or true healthcare leader. And we have talked about the importance many times in our coaching programs and on our podcasts about boundaries. And how that is such an important ability of leaders to have strong boundaries, to say no more often. In fact, in podcast episode number 149, we had the boundary boss herself, Terry Cole. If you have not listened to that podcast, please listen to it. A lot of great tips on why boundaries are important for leaders and how to establish them. And today we're going to be talking about margin. Now, margin is like boundary setting, but it's framed a little bit differently. And it's very important for you as a leader to have margin in your life. And when we say margin, we mean creating enough space for yourself and your lives that you don't get overloaded and overwhelmed by all the work and the demands that you deal with all the time as a leader. So it calls for great intention. And the ultimate prescription during these times is creating margin in our life because having margin in your life is a prerequisite for well-being. So again, really important. So we're going to introduce you to margin and we're going to give you some tips onto how to have margin in your life.
Yeah. And if you're a conflicted healthcare leader, you have been experiencing, as Michelle mentioned, like significant challenges, multiple COVID surges. Some of you are still experiencing COVID surges, but even that is nothing compared to what you're experiencing in the aftermath of the initial surges of COVID, right? With the increasing volume of really critically ill patients in the face of reduced resources. I mean, it's just going on and on and on, right? So it's not just the pandemic, it's everything that has resulted from that. And on top of that, dealing with, the mental and emotional state of your staff and trying to support them as much as you possibly can, right? So all of that, right, is adding more stress to you. And when you have more stress without margin, then you get into the fatigue and it leads to exhaustion. And then before you know it, you're totally burnt out.
Right.
So, as a conflicted healthcare leader, you may or may not even be aware that you need margin in your life or what the state of the margin in your life is, because you're so busy in the managing of all these challenges that you're not thinking about yourself, right? And you keep putting more and more on your plate, or sometimes others help you with that and they put a little bit of stuff on your plate
have
too,
some
right?
More, have some more.
But you may also be adding more plates, right, that you're trying to manage, right? So you may be taking on more, adding more plates than what you already have, right? And what you're trying to manage. So that's something else that you might be doing that is influencing the margin in your life.
Yeah. So it's really challenging. We know as leaders, what it results in is pain. It can cause great pain from the stress and the workload that you carry every day. And then this is where our beliefs are challenged. So you could have limiting beliefs that you just have to suck it up and deal with it. This is just the way it is as a leader. And that there is no wiggle room in my schedule or in my life. And I can't squeeze anything else in. So we can listen to your thoughts of how you are approaching these things that are coming at you. And we also have an additional challenge that we have new leaders that are entering the field of healthcare. And what's come to our attention in working with leaders in our coaching programs is that these leaders, they don't know anything else. They have come in during the pandemic and they are burning out fast. There's just so much coming at them. Their mentors are under a great deal of stress. So the question is, how do you create margin in your life as an emerging leader, and as experienced leaders, how do we support these emerging leaders as well? So framing this up, I think, is really important to them. And having no margin in your life can affect several different areas. It can affect you physically, emotionally, your time, and financially. So those are the different areas that when we look to have margin in our life that we really want to focus on. And again, it can just feel like, I need to breathe again. I really need some more margin in my life. I have no reserves to draw from. I've got nothing. Well, I got nothing. There's nothing left.
Yeah. Sometimes you feel that way.
Yeah, you do.
Right?
You do.
You've got nothing.
So in our work on burnout, and we've been studying it quite a bit, talking to leaders across the country, the suggestion of having margin in healthcare leaders' lives came up, and it brought us back to the fact that a book was written about this in 1992 by a medical doctor, Dr. Richard A. Swenson. So that was 30 years ago that he wrote that book, and it's probably more needed today than it was back then.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And when I first learned about this book, and I actually said to Tracy, I have that book. I remember when it was introduced, there were people on a stage and they had a stick with spinning plates on it, and more plates were added. And then at the peak of it, all the plates fell and shattered on the ground, kind of as a metaphor of what happens when we are overloaded and we don't have enough margin in our life. And that has stuck with me all these years of why this is so important. And of course, we see alignment between Dr. Swenson's book on margin and what he's bringing in that, and the need for healthcare leaders and everybody actually, and our dynamic balance effect framework. And that we do have to make mindful choices. We do have to leverage polarity intelligence. And so he talks about balance. We'll talk about that today. And then personal alignment, our vision, our purpose, our habits, all of those are very pertinent to margin as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think, Dr. Swenson noted way back then we were lacking margin in our lives. And especially as health professionals, right?
Yes.
And that we really suffered deeply from the absence of margin. And that was then. We know with the rate of burnout and everything that's happening now, like this is on steroids, right?
It is.
This is far more than probably he even imagined could be. And of course, the challenges, right, that we've noted, and many of the challenges in his book were identified as problems, right? Because that's the frame we use for everything.
All the time.
All the challenges that we face, right? It's because we're problem solvers. We're problem solvers as healthcare clinicians. But really, the absence of margin in many of the instances was really the imbalance of polarities is what came forth, right? As you look through the book, and those signs and symptoms were really the result of undiagnosed or mismanaged polarities. So again, it's that understanding what we're dealing with here, right?
Yep,
and
exactly.
when we leverage polarities, we can get more margin in our lives because we're paying attention to the things that we need to develop that margin. So the number one reason he cited at that point in time that we lacked margin was the pain of progress. Now, just think about all the progress that's happened.
Yeah.
Since then, right? That was before the iPhone, before like all the stuff, all the technology, right? All that. So in other words, as we make progress in the world, we can make progress like physically, right? I think if we think about wealth, technology, health, the material world as we speak, and then the cognitive progress, like look how much progress we've made in the knowledge movement, right? Like we've become a knowledge right?
Exponential growth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Information, knowledge, education, all of that, right? The intellectual world. So we've got both those things kind of, right, really expanding and growing. But there's an inability to balance that with the processes that support us as people and support us in the leveraging of that progress, right? So that's where we lack the margin. That's where we end up in a deficit with that. So we don't have the support that we need to leverage the progress, right? The progress gets ahead of the processes that we need to really engage in that progress and leverage that progress to the best of our ability. So that's where we kind of end up having an over focus on progressing. Like, oh, let's
go.
Yeah, exactly. Build, more, right? You see that sometimes in, think about it in cities.
Yes.
Like, when I lived in Phoenix, it was just like grow, expand, right? But then we didn't have the structures, the processes to support the people to live within those areas as the growth was happening. So it's kind of something like that too, right?
Right.
We over focus on progressing, then we neglect that need to support us. And technology is a great example in healthcare. Look at all the technology that has, that we have experienced, that exponential growth of technology. But it's like technology for technology's sake, right? It has a purpose, but when it's not aligned with practice, when it's not aligned with processes, it becomes a burden. And we've seen that with burnout, with physicians, right? And other healthcare clinicians, that it really has a negative impact on the workflow, a negative impact on the people using the technology because we're not marrying it to the practice and the processes that we need to leverage the technology to the best of our ability. So just another example kind of how that comes to be and how that creates that margin issue for us.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's and of course, we didn't know about polarities 30 years ago when we first read the book. So it was kind of fun going back and looking at it through what we know now and what we've learned about exponential growth with technology and practice and how, there's a lot of reality that if you're imbalanced, it does impact margin for sure. A couple other polarities that impact margin in our lives are caring for self and caring for others. Okay. And it's okay to put yourself first. And we know this is a struggle for leaders. We're always putting other people first. We don't put our oxygen mask on first. Well, that then limits the margin in our life.
Well, we don't even think about ourselves.
No.
We've been on multiple calls recently.
Yes.
And we ask people, like, what do you want? It's all about the team. It's all about the organization. They don't even say, this is what I need for me. I mean, you might have a couple people, but most of the leaders are focused right now on everybody else and moving them through it, not thinking about what they need and what margin they need in their lives to re-engage and to be excited and energized by the future.
Yep, you're right. It's been very validating that it's true.
Yeah. You won't care for yourself if you're not thinking about yourself.
Right. And then you won't have margin in your life. And without margin in your life, you don't have anything you'll have no reserve. You'll have no reserve to care for you or your team.
Right.
So it's such an important message. And so you have to, put buffers in your schedule to care for you because you are a priority. And if you're always on the list last, you're never going to have that margin. Productivity relationships is another polarity that help us have margin. And there's a tendency, and Dr. Swenson notes this too, that we over-focus on productivity. Right? Progress, he says, is the biggest failure has been its inability to nurture and protect right relationships. Because we're so focused on progress and productivity, It doesn't give us the time and attention on relationships where are equally important.
And that's critical right now.
Oh, yes.
Like when we listen to leaders and they talk about the new normal and how to move through these challenging times, how to take care of the patients with quality care, which is critical. But it's the best way to move forward is in relationship, right? Like in partnership and in relationships and strengthening the relationships, right? To get people reconnected and to develop what you need to have that quality care. So it's that.
So we're all going together, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We're all going together.
Yeah.
And he really states that margin helps us nurture relationships. Again, we kind of think of it as space in our life to really do that. And margin exists for relationships. So it's very significant. And that means we keep space in our schedules to, go out to coffee with a colleague, even though we're really busy at work, keeping the date night with your partner or your spouse, taking the vacations with your loved one. All of those are really important to have margin in our life. So it is clear that he knows that you need both. He just didn't have it in the polarity lens. And so we're kind of adding that to his theory today. And he also brought out in his book too, which I just thought I really appreciated, is that you have to have balance. And he uses that word too. Balance is important. And because he's a medical doctor and we work with healthcare leaders, he made the point that, our body is our greatest teacher when it comes to balance. When our body gets out of balance, then things are disturbed, and that's when disease happens. We get sick, we feel pain. So there was a part in his book too, he's like, pay attention to this. And he even lists out what he calls balancing acts and how we feel these tugs between these tensions: work and leisure, action and meditation, giving and receiving, speaking and listening, structure and spontaneity. And he had a whole list of them. Those are just a few. And so I think people know these concepts are important when it comes to polarities and having margin in your life and balance in your life, but they often don't frame it around polarities themselves and polarity intelligence.
Well, and I don't think they understand the significance of that relationship.
They don't.
It's not just about we got two things that are connected. There's a law of how that works. Those two things work together. And I think that's what people miss. They know what they're experiencing. Like he knew what he was experiencing and what was important, but he did not understand that there is a natural law about how polarities work and operate, and they all operate the same way. And it's understanding that is what helps you to leverage it.
Right.
Right.
It helps you to know what to do about the life tugs.
That's right.
Put interventions around it, action steps, know your early warning signs so that you always can experience the best of both.
Yeah.
Right. The best of both.
So for our call to action today, we've got some some prescriptions, so to speak. Again, take what we say and use it in whatever way is going to work for you, right? It's not the end all be all, but here's some ideas for you, right? So there's the four margins. To be healthy, we require margin, at least these four areas. So again, it's the emotional energy, the physical energy, the time, and the financial, right?
Yep.
So we're going to share 3 call to actions in each of those areas. Lucky you.
Get your pen and paper out.
And we think these are high on the list, right? Based on just our experiences. So we're going to start with the margin in the emotional energy. And this is the call to action. So 1, cultivate social support. And this aligns with our mindful choices and really, healthy relationships. So again, we all need connection and human contact. So don't isolate. Call a friend. Take a minute to have a cup of coffee with a colleague, right? Network, get connected, join groups that will be a support to you, right? One of the things that we've learned in our groups is everybody's like, wow, I'm not the only one experiencing this. That's the benefit of connecting with others. You're not alone. You're not the only one facing challenges or with a lack of margin in your life, right? So we can do that, really connect with each other. The second one is to create appropriate boundaries. So as Michelle mentioned, right, boundaries, it's similar margins, similar. You get more margin when you have appropriate boundaries, right, in your life. And learn to say no. differentiate when it's important for you to say no. What matters most? What do you want to give your attention and energy to? And say no to everything else that just doesn't fit right now, right? And that's how you're going to regain some margin. The third is laugh and cry. Well, we know how to laugh, and we've had a few tears too, right? So humor is medicine, right? Crying is a release, right? It's an emotional diuresis. So do both, right? Laughter lifts your spirits. Crying reliefs, right? It's a cleansing. It's a release. And both are really important, right? For having margin. So, you're going through a lot right now. A lot. And it's okay to feel those emotions and cry, release that, let it go, and fill yourself up with some laughter, right? Now, margin and physical energy. Here's a call to action. And these align kind of with the personal alignment aspects of our framework. So number one is to take personal responsibility. I'm going to say that again. Take personal responsibility. Nobody can do your push-ups for you, right? Nobody can set the boundaries for you. Nobody can do your exercise for you. Nobody can get enough sleep for you. You have to do it, right? Nobody can do that. Leverage your body. Your body will tell you what it needs, and just take responsibility for that, right? That's important. Number two is change your habits. You get your habits, right? If you don't have margin, then you've got habits that are preventing you from having that margin. So you've got to identify how you can get more margin, either physically, emotionally, what habits need changing, right? Start small, but start. Just one habit is good. Like start with one habit that's going to increase the margin in your life. And exercise. Choose what works for you, right? But move your body. You're going to feel a lot better. You don't have to spend an hour, right, doing some kind of routine. You just start moving. It will make you healthier, and you're going to have more energy, more margin. You're going to feel better, right? Whatever kind of exercise is going to fit into your schedule at this point in time. And the more you do it, the more you'll want to do, the more you'll want to do something different, right? Whatever's enjoyable for you. And that's what we do, right? We like to walk.
Yep. Tracy walks in the morning and I walk in the afternoon because we're opposites.
That's right. Because we do everything differently.
We fit it in.
Yep.
We fit it in.
Exactly.
All right. So I'm going to talk about margin in time and margin in finances. So one of the prescriptions for our call to actions with time is expect the unexpected. So one of the things we've learned as entrepreneurs and healthcare leaders is everything takes longer than you think. Oh, so true. Yes. So plan that into your schedule. Give yourself an extra little space of time to get something done. Block more time, add more time to your calendar, because guarantee you it's going to take longer than what you expect. So there's things you can do to help with that. Call to action number 2 is to create buffer zones. So again, that's related to number 1, but this is actually building in the buffer zones in your calendar to do what's important, whether it's exercise, working on a project that you're working on, just building that me time for yourself, right? So I like to put LMA on my calendar for Leave Michelle Alone. Both of us write block on our calendars when we have to get something done. So do whatever works for you, and then, work with the people that you work with too, and when you need some extra buffer time as well.
Well, even just creating margin between meetings. So you're not going from one meeting or one phone call to the next. We'll just put block for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, just to give yourself a little breather, get recentered, move on to the next thing. That's a great way to do it too.
Yeah. Yeah. And another time factor to think about in creating margin is that you can't rush wisdom. So what this really means is in our current system, you're rewarded for making decisions quickly and moving on. We're making decisions quickly and moving on. And sometimes you got to slow down and have that meaningful dialogue to really understand a holistic view of what's happening. And that if life's pace pushes you, it's okay sometimes to push back. Like, what? I think we need a little bit more time to talk about this and take time, because with that time you gain clarity, and that also helps with margin in your life. And then lastly, margin in finances. So when you want to create margin in your life, The first call to action is to balance margin and mission in your life. So create a plan for, put an action plan together of having time for putting time for margin and also time for the mission in your life. So that could be at a unit level, department level, organizational, or personal finances. But your intention on that margin and mission polarity. Call to action number 2 is life is too short. Buy the shoes.
Or the technology or
whatever.
Whatever floats your boat.
Yes. But don't put off the things that you love and desire the most, because that also helps with margin in our life. You don't need to be extravagant and take time, but just take the time to enjoy the things you love. Again, that can maybe just gifts for yourself, little getaways, vacation. And the last one is to invest in yourself. So investing in you as so that you have the support to be your best self, whether that's coaching, spending more time with colleagues. When we spend time with our true leaders, we really know how important, they know how important it is, and we reinforce it all the time to put additional margin in our lives.
So if you're not recognizing the value of having margin in your life or creating margin in your life, then, you experience the downsides, right, of over focusing, because these challenges that are, you're experiencing that are creating a lack of margin are really polarities, right? Some of them, some may be problems.
Yep.
But the majority of what were pointed out to us were really polarities, right? So you get in the downside of over focusing on progress or over focusing on caring for others, or, just over focusing on productivity as an example that we gave earlier, right? And you're going to be a leader, right? Trying to keep all the plates spinning. You're going to be that one on the stage going, okay, right? And then they're all going to crash.
They're all going to crash.
Because you can't sustain it, right? And that's the benefit of leveraging these polarities, these challenges, right, that come up that are polarities, is that you get into a virtuous cycle, right, versus the vicious cycle, and you drop in the plates or experiencing the negative consequences of not being able to keep it all going. And you're fatigued, right? You're just fatigued or exhausted, or at the end of the day, you got nothing, right? You have no energy for the things that matter most to you in your life. So that's kind of what you start to experience over time when you're not creating that margin, or you don't recognize that you need to have it, or that it's absent in your life.
No margin. No margin. But imagine your life with a lot of margin or enough margin, whatever it is for you, so that you can be, alive and productive, and at the same time have great relationships and be able to make decisions and make room in your life, so you're not dropping all the plates. And you can bake it in yourself, and you have the agency to do that.
Well, and I think, we give attention to the things that are most important to us. And so it's really a good question. What's important to you? And if your life, your health, your well-being is not at the top of your list of things that are important, then this is an opportunity for you to reflect on that and to really think about that. Are you saying you don't matter?
That's pretty powerful, right? Yeah. So you can be very intentional about having margin in your life, and that's what creates dynamic balance in your life. And you're able to balance those critical tensions that we talked about, and you know what to do with it, so that you can have action steps on both sides and create that margin so that you can prevent the exhaustion, prevent the fatigue, and prevent the burnout.
Yep. And we just say this because we've lived it, you guys.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had plenty of times in our lives with no margin, okay? And had to course correct, right? Really crashed around that. And so, we're still works in progress as well. But we know this. It's front in our mind. We take the time for the things that will help us. We just took a vacation, a 2-week vacation.
Can we go back?
We're scheduling vacations every so often, right? Because we know we need that time. Each week, we keep each other on track with, how we're doing with balance in our lives and the things that matter us, our activity, our rest. We support each other in that, right? You can do it, and you just have to be committed to it, right? You have to be committed. You have to make yourself a priority. And you know what? Everything is still there the next day, right? The next day.
Exactly right.
And you get a chance to role model this for the people that you care for, your family, your children, your partners, and your team, right? So you get a chance to role model that. So when you're a true healthcare leader, then you prioritize the things that are going to give you margin, that are going to give you energy. You take the action to protect it. You put the boundary around it, right? And again, it doesn't have to be extensive. Even you gain strength with just little bits, right? Little bits of margin add up over time. And you've prioritized that physical energy and taking care of yourself and the responsibility to manage your physical energy, your health, your well-being. You prioritize the time to focus on the things that matter most. You get clear what is most important to me in this season of my life. And that can look different for different people, right? And then you prioritize when it comes to your financial health as well, right? Both in your organization as a leader, leveraging, like Michelle said, that margin and the mission, staying connected to the things that are important, your personal life, and managing the financial aspects of your life, and just investing in yourself and, managing those types of things. It becomes really, really important. So, when you just get all this margin in your life when you're a true, thriving, resilient, and unstoppable leader. What we want for everybody.
That's what we want for everyone. So we want you all to leave today going, wow, what am I going to do to create margin in my life?
That's right. It's so important.
So hopefully we gave you a lot of great tips. Yep. And we just thank you for being here for another episode of Healthcare's Missing Logic podcast. And if you take some action steps to create margin in your life, let us know. Drop us a line on our social media channels. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram,
YouTube.
Twitter, YouTube.
We're everywhere.
You can say, I got margin. Tell us what you did. That would just really be so inspirational for us.
Yeah.
And if you found this helpful and you think, boy, I can think of a few people in my life that this would really help because they need margin in their lives, share this episode with them. Pass it along to a friend or a colleague. And if you have not already subscribed to our newsletter, we invite you to do that as well, as we have a lot of tips and updates in there. You can do that at missinglogic.com/newsletter. And we will see you on our next podcast episode.
Yeah. Thanks for being here. And in the meantime, stay safe, stay healthy, and create some margin.
Yes.
We'll see you next time.
See ya. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Healthcare's Missing Logic podcast, now a top-rated podcast for healthcare leaders. Please share this podcast with other healthcare leaders and anyone else you think would benefit. We are certain that if you found value in it, they will too. If you haven't already done so, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any episodes. And also, it would mean the world to us if you took a quick moment to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast player. It helps to get the word out about our podcast and incredible guests. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want to watch our podcasts. You can also follow us on our Missing Logic social media channels, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Until next time.